Excelsior!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of Excelsior. I'm your moderator, Christian Buckley. Joining me for the final episode in this run of Excelsior is Jack Martin.
Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
It has been.
What's the quote? Part of the journey's the end. Is that?
Yes.
I know that's a quote. Like, I know it's a historic quote.
That's
I know
a quote
it's not
from
an original
somewhere.
thing, but I was quoting Tony Stark saying it in the Endgame trailer.
Oh, true.
Specifically. So how are you doing?
Well, I'm going to continue the trend of quoting Endgame stuff because we're going to have to move on after this.
Yeah.
Do you remember that trailer? I didn't realize how funny Captain America saying "move on" was until someone pointed it out recently.
Yeah. That was the Super Bowl one, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But seriously, I've been good. I've been good, hanging in there.
Very nice. So before we get into news, because we do have a little bit of news to discuss on our final episode here, have you seen Spider-Man again yet?
I did. I saw it for the second time.
Brief recap, I guess. I really liked it a lot. It's probably my favorite Spider-Man movie. You had a few issues with it.
Yes.
Has anything changed since then?
I enjoyed it more going into it this time because my expectations were known.
Mm-hmm.
So I ranked it in my personal ranking above Ant-Man and the Wasp. But I think they're kind of both on the same level. It's very mid-tier Marvel for me, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's just not up there for me with other Spider-Man stories. I think Spider-Man 2 is still my favorite Spider-Man movie, followed probably by Into the Spider-Verse, and then maybe Homecoming.
Spider-Man 2 is still in my top 5.
You saw that recently, right?
I watched. I was house sitting for my girlfriend because she moved for a job recently, and I had to watch her dogs. And I saw the ending of original Spider-Man, which I have a huge nostalgia for, and then the first half hour of Spider-Man 2, because then I had to take care of dog business. But yeah, that movie's good. I think Spider-Man 1 I watched, I sat down purposely to watch in the last year, and still enjoyed it, but God, does not hold up well.
No, not at all. That movie does not hold up.
But yeah, Spider-Man 2 is still my top 5, yeah.
I argue that movie still holds up. There are some quirky things about it. Some cheesy parts, definitely, to Spider-Man 2, but still, as a whole, thematically, I think it holds up.
Yeah. So Spider-Man laid out the next step for Marvel, and like I said, we do have news to discuss because this episode is coming out Monday, July, forgot the month we were in, July 14th, and later this week we have San Diego Comic-Con 2019, which will be sure to bring lots of Marvel news. We got some Marvel Games stuff going on. Greg Miller is hosting a panel where they're going to talk about Ultimate Alliance 3, which also comes out next week. They're going to be showing Iron Man VR. Very interested to see more of that. As well as the Avengers game from Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix that was revealed officially at E3. They're going to be showing gameplay to the audience only of whatever hall that panel's happening in. So stinks for us, we're probably not going to get a good look at it still. I bet some cell phone footage leaks out again. Maybe that'll push their hand, and maybe that's all part of the plan for them. Maybe they really want to just dump it out later that night. But as of right now, only for the people attending. But what's more juicy is that Marvel Studios is returning to San Diego Comic-Con. Last year, they were not there, and I feel like, I don't know if I'm right or wrong here, but we were talking about this before the show. It feels like they've been gone from Comic-Con for a while.
It does. The last, huge... And I don't think they stream panels. I could be wrong. I just don't keep up with panels from Comic-Con. The most I keep up with Comic-Con is just whatever news comes out of it. And I feel like the last big time that Marvel has been at Comic-Con, at least I think it's at Comic-Con, was the Phase 3 announcement.
Yeah, so I pulled up an article from IndieWire, and they were talking about the history of the last few years for Marvel Studios at Comic-Con. And the last time that was a major event was 2014 with the Phase 3 reveal.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know they were there for the Infinity War reveal, I think. And they could have skipped more years between then because of D23. And I remember from years prior headlines about like, oh, Marvel's skipping, DC has nothing to show this year, it's going to be a weak year. But Marvel has still had a presence in the comic book scene and in the television department at Comic-Con. But we're getting a full-blown Marvel Studios presentation, and like we said, if history tells us anything, it's probably going to be big. I remember a couple weeks ago, though, there was a headline about Kevin Feige saying don't expect 5 years of movies from Comic-Con. In a prior episode, we also talked about how Brie Larson is going to help present Phase 4 at D23 this year. So it brings into question, what do we think is going to happen at Comic-Con this year?
Yeah, that's interesting because what you're saying about Brie Larson introducing Phase 4 at D23, it seems like that's where the big one is going to be.
Right.
Although I do hope they show a Black Widow trailer here.
Me too. That's my minimum expectation, is to get a trailer for Black Widow.
Yeah, maybe like a broader focus at D23 and a more specific focus for Black Widow, and maybe like another movie at Comic-Con, because we've seen nothing from Black Widow, but we know obviously that it's in production. We've seen like photos from set and stuff like that. So I think it'd be really interesting to see what they're going to do with that movie, and I want to know the tone with that movie. And it's interesting because it's a prequel for a character who's dead, which there are not many instances that I can think of where that has happened, aside from like the prequels of Star Wars.
Yeah, Black Widow is something that from the set photos and just in general seeing more about it, I've been getting more and more excited for. So I think that getting a look at it is going to be important because that's the next Marvel movie, and I'm interested to see how they present it, because if that's the film to kick off Phase 4 and you just said it's a prequel about a dead character, that seems like a strange place to like plant your flag for Phase 4.
Right.
That aside though, like I said, super excited for this movie. Better late than never, I guess, but like I would have killed for a Black Widow movie.
I think
at any point in time,
a Black Widow movie would have made sense around the time of Ultron. Because she started coming into her own then, and like after the fact, I think it would have made sense because Ultron really set up Phase 3 really well, and I think it would have made sense to see her own movie. Especially, like, it was a silly line, but she was like, "I'm a monster because I can't be pregnant." That was really silly, but she was kind of dealing with turmoil in that movie, and that would have been interesting to see before Infinity War and Endgame.
I would have really liked to see, and I think this is when it's going to take place, because there was a set photo of her driving a 2017 BMW. I wish the movie came out between Civil War and Infinity War, and it was just like Natasha doing a side mission or something.
Yeah.
For her own, whatever her path was after the split of Civil War. That would have been cool. I think that's when it's taking place. We know Taskmaster's involved, so yeah, I'm fully expecting a trailer from this movie because it started shooting at the beginning of the summer, and I'm sure they have something to show. But Marvel has a trend of releasing 3 movies a year these days. As far as I'm aware, there's 3 movies coming next year. One's dated for February. I'm assuming that's when Black Widow's coming.
It's got to be.
Yeah, because there's nothing else in production right now that we know of that's like full-blown production. There's nothing shooting right now. The 2 most likely candidates that I think we also see things from at Comic-Con, just because of how much we've heard about them already for coming next year, maybe, would be Shang-Chi and the Eternals. Because throughout the year, we've heard a lot of news about the Eternals that we've talked about on the show. I still haven't gotten a chance to read the Eternals comic, but I'm hoping if they show something at Comic-Con, that gives me a push. There's been lots of casting news.
Millie Bobby Brown, right? Recently?
Yeah, that was just a couple days ago. Yeah. So Do you think Eternals is going to get like a big blowout? And do you think maybe what we were talking about being more focused on these three films, because they're kind of outliers, like what we said about Black Widow being a prequel, Shang-Chi is a very unknown character, and then the Eternals are even more of a lesser known property, but they want it to be this epic. So maybe focusing on these three because they have their own unique like meta narratives around them is the right decision, and then D23 is when we get the full phase.
I think Phase 4 is going to be the weirdest phase of Marvel.
Me too.
And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Right now I'm leaning bad, but that's all to... We're going to see how that turns out. But I think it's a good idea for Comic-Con to focus on these three movies if they're closer to release, which I agree with you. I think these are probably the ones we're going to see. I also think Black Panther's probably a good candidate, but...
I know Doctor Strange, the script is done, I think.
Yeah, those two are up next, I think. But I think the three movies we were talking about are coming up. I think it's better to do a smaller focus on these three movies at Comic-Con, and then D23 is the bigger focus, and especially a huge focus on the main event of Phase 4, if that's what they want to do. I don't know if they want to do another Avengers or a Secret Wars or something like that, but whatever is the next big focus, I think, is going to be at D23.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's likely that if I were in charge, which I'm not, and Kevin Feige probably knows way better than I do, I think what we're talking about right now about keeping the focus on these three movies at Comic-Con, when there is so much of attention for the first time in a few years for Marvel at Comic-Con, highlight these because they're lesser known properties. But like the whole Brie Larson event, there's probably going to be at least a handful of sequels being announced there. So like Spider-Man 3 and Black Panther 2 don't need the press of returning to Comic-Con to announce something. Because like it's Spider-Man, it's Black Panther. Those are two like hugely iconic comic book characters now. So I'm hoping we get some cool surprises from Comic-Con. It's a bummer that right now we could probably talk for another 2 minutes and then just lay out probably what is going to be Phase 4, just based on what we know right now. So I hope it's a surprise. But throwing a wrench in this whole thing is the Russo Brothers, because a couple days ago on Twitter, they posted a video. It was black screen, big chunky yellow font, 7/19/2019. Underneath it, there was audio of them presenting Infinity War for the first time at Comic-Con. Today was first off, that was weird, right? That was an out of left field thing, because we know the Russos said that they were kind of done with Marvel right now. What did you think after you saw that video? Because I remember I sent it to our group chat, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah, so I texted you, and the first thing I thought of, because of the font and lettering in color, it was yellow dates, and I was like, that looks like Watchmen lettering.
Yeah,
but
it does.
Obviously not. And Pat texted in the group, I didn't think they were actually going to do it, but that's just like what came to mind. But Watchmen is technically DC, so they wouldn't jump ship.
And Watchmen's probably already at Comic-Con with that TV show coming up.
Right, yeah. I didn't think they were like going to direct an episode or anything, but I was like, that just made me think of Watchmen for some reason. Obviously, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's Marvel. I think it's probably some IP that people know and love that they're going to helm. Because the choice of using the Ultron announcement, like the hype moment of them actually announcing that, is something I think they're going to do on the 19th. But I think it's not going to be Marvel. I think it's going to be some sort of IP that people know, whether it's like based on a book or based on comics, that has nothing to do with Marvel, or a video game or something. I think it's going to be something huge, and I think they're going to take their own spin on it, and people are going to like that.
So it's interesting you say that because today they also 2 hours ago from now, we're recording 4:40 p.m. on a Friday. They tweeted out a video, same sort of thing, and it said 11 a.m. in the chunky yellow font.
Mm-hmm.
But the audio. Did you ever watch Community?
No.
Okay, so they directed Community.
Right.
That's where they were after Arrested Development and before the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
They did I think almost at least all the Community that I watched, and there's a stinger at the end of every episode of Community. Early seasons, a lot of it was Danny Pudi and Donald Glover doing like a little skit together. So they had the audio of Danny Pudi and Donald Glover's characters rapping over a beat that Danny Pudi was like doing. It's just like very basic, and then Donald Glover's rapping in Spanish with words from their Spanish textbook, and that was the audio they used. So I think you're right that maybe the hints, maybe there's like some sort of hints about what they're doing here. Like maybe they're, like you said, working on some new original thing or an adaptation of something, and maybe they're working with Donald Glover and Danny Pudi. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be anyone's guess at this point, but I'm excited to see what that announcement is after seeing how they were able to sort of reinvent the MCU with the last 4 movies they did.
They're interesting to me because, like what you're saying, they come from Arrested Development and Community, which is TV, so it's like significantly smaller than movies, and it's significantly yeah, and it's totally different to what they did with Winter Soldier, Civil War, and especially Infinity War and Endgame, because those latter 2 movies are so serious in literally the biggest movies of all time. And they're just very strange to me because I don't know if they can go back to that smaller scale, or maybe they could, but people's expectations might be a little, they might be thinking one thing and then, I don't know, they go do something else. But that'd be interesting if they did do something smaller. I don't think they will. I think they're going to stick to something big, but we'll see.
This reminds me of post-Avengers Age of Ultron, when Joss Whedon was just like, hey, I'm making a modern-day version of a Shakespeare play with Nathan Fillion, and I was like, oh, okay, Joss Whedon, yeah. But, yeah, I think the Russos, if they do something smaller, I'd be interested. If it's an IP I care about especially, that would be cool. I didn't think of this until we started talking right now. It also gave me, like, Kick-Ass vibes.
Yeah.
Like, that imagery, that the yellow on black. Just because I'm thinking right now the Kick-Ass title is just blocky yellow font across black. So maybe they reboot Kick-Ass or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But whatever they do, I'm excited to see what it is, Marvel or not. So, do you have any last things that you hope to see out of Comic-Con? Like, any dreams? Do you want to see, like, the cast of, like, the new phase of the MCU out on stage, like they did with the Avengers that time, or
the
some
one
surprise?
thing I would want would be a totally new surprise movie from a character I know nothing about. I know a lot of people want to see a Moon Knight movie. I know a lot of people want to see a Namor movie, or Namor, I don't know how you say it. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty with you there, because, like, I said this earlier, we know a lot of Phase 4.
Definitely.
And it would be nice to have one surprise, you know, like Serpent Society, a Civil War style thing. Maybe not a bait and switch like that, but something that is a surprise in the schedule would be welcome for me.
I agree.
But that wraps Comic-Con news. If anything crazy happens, I might throw a video together about Phase 4 next weekend. So if you're interested on that, you can be on youtube.com/joyclicks, where you're watching us if you can see our faces. But yeah, that wraps Comic-Con. So we are now going to jump into comics, our own comic convention, with just the two of us right here talking about some comic books that we've been reading that we want to give a shout out to, because for me at least, I don't know if this is the same for you, after we started getting into the schedule of wanting to read comics every week, I've been reading more independently outside of the required reading of every week.
I have too. A few times. Not probably as much as you, but definitely, like, I have outside of this.
not weekly, and I've bought more comics than I've read since we started this. But
Yeah.
yeah, I have a couple things I want to shout out. So, do you just have the one that you mentioned to me?
Yes, I have the one that I mentioned to you.
Okay.
You want me to go first?
So I have a quick shout out, and then I
Okay.
have the one that I'm bringing.
Let's do
So, quick shout out, Amazing Spider-Man. I haven't had a chance to read issue 25 yet. That came out this past Wednesday, and that was the start of year 2 of this current run of Spider-Man. And I have heard nothing but amazing things about, pun intended, Amazing Spider-Man. Because Marvel had their fresh start last summer. They started a lot of their books, same continuity, but they gave them number ones, so that way it's much more easy to hop on. So I own the first 3 volumes of the current Spider-Man run. I've read through the first 1.5 volumes, and I'm a big fan of it. It's very, like, what I like about Spider-Man. It's Peter struggling. For the first few issues, it focuses on him living with his friend and a supervillain that, like, he knows he's a supervillain because he's Spider-Man, but he's paying rent and they're subletting that guy's apartment. So it's like a funny sort of like Peter Parker in this like crazy situation. They go some cool places with that relationship. It's dealing with some fallout of the last Amazing Spider-Man writers run, which lasted, I think, like close to 10 years.
Whoa.
And a lot of people weren't huge fans of it. It was very like techie Spider-Man, and he owned like a Stark Industries level business. So they stripped all that away. It's very bare bones Peter Parker Spider-Man stuff, and I've really enjoyed what I've read so far. And the reason I brought up issue 25 is because that is also a new beginning for the next year and more, presumably, of this writer's run. The writer's Nick Spencer. He is the guy who made Captain America a Hydra agent a few years ago.
Very controversial.
Yeah, and it's cool. I think it's cool because they got him, who in his career was like hated by like a lot of comic fans because of that twist. It was very controversial, and they put him on Spider-Man, and at the end of Amazing Spider-Man, the character of Spider-Man was also kind of hated by the public.
Huh.
So having him start there has been kind of an interesting place to hop on, and I really like his take on the character, and I think it's worth checking out.
That sounds really cool. So it wasn't a fresh start last summer. They just kind of restarted the numbers essentially.
Yeah, and I think Marvel has done that another time within the past 5 years, and people were like roll their eyes about this initiative. It's like, okay, yeah, new number one, but the Fresh Start Marvel program is what they called it, I think, or Marvel Fresh Start, and almost every single thing that I've looked into, every single book, every new number one from that initiative has like glowing reviews.
Oh, cool.
Which from my history of like looking into Marvel comics, hasn't always been the case, but right now it seems like a lot of stuff they're doing is working very well.
That's good because it's less intimidating to do that for me as like a new comic reader than to jump into Amazing Spider-Man like number 500 whatever they're on, you know.
Yeah. And I wanted to shout out issue 25 because it's 60 pages in one issue, so it's a big like long thing, and it's at the end of a probably like 10 issue arc, so it is all intents and purposes, it's another fresh start for this run of the character. If you're interested, I think it's like $8. It's a little more expensive because it's more pages, but if you're curious, I'd say probably check out the first issue of that run. If you like it and you don't want to catch up, just hop into 25 and then go from there.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds really cool.
Yeah. So what about you? What is your thing you want to bring up today?
So my suggestion, and I appreciate that we're both wearing Spider-Man shirts, is a Spider-Man run. It's called Back in Black. And I'm going to give you the premise real quick, and for those listening out there. So this is right after Civil War. And if you remember, after Civil War, Peter Parker eventually leaves Iron Man's side, goes to fight with Captain America. Captain America basically surrenders and gets arrested. Everyone that's on his side most of them are on the run, and so is Peter. So Peter, Aunt May, and MJ are all living underground after Civil War, and they're living in this motel. And I assume this happens before Back in Black, because Back in Black opens right with it. Maybe it opens. This happens in like a comic right before Back in Black, but Aunt May is shot by a sniper, who is aiming for Peter Parker. Peter Parker basically reacts by throwing a car at the sniper in whatever window he's in, and he rushes Aunt May to a hospital, and he's swinging through New York without a suit. One of the coolest panels I've ever seen in a Spider-Man comic, because he's swinging through New York without a suit. It's incredible. I'll send you that if you want to put that up there.
Yeah, sure.
And he crashes through a window and leaves Aunt May to be treated. Mary Jane shows up and calls Aunt May Riley, and calls herself her niece, basically to like hide their identities because they're all kind of being hunted down. And then doctors tell Mary Jane that Aunt May is in a coma and will eventually die. Meanwhile, Peter begins the process of hunting down the men responsible for shooting Aunt May. He finds a piece of a scope left behind by the sniper, and he interrogates a thug to find out who owns it. After this, Peter goes to this building where he kept his black Spider-Man suit for safekeeping. And he says he stopped wearing it because it sent the wrong message, but it's the message he wants to send tonight. And I have a couple quotes to like set the tone about this run. On this night, the rules are gone. No jokes, no punches pulled. As of tonight, no one gets away. No one threatens my family. No one. And that goes along with a panel of a bloody fist of Peter punching these thugs. And finally, I will find them, and when I do, I'm going to kill them. And that is like the least Spider-Man quotes I've ever heard in my entire life, but it's so fitting with where he's at in this comic after Civil War, where he's underground, totally regrets revealing himself to the public, especially now because he feels so responsible for Aunt May's injury that he is basically taking it out on the people who did that, while also blaming himself for the situation. And I was describing this to you in Pat. It's essentially Spider-Man as Batman.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I read it. Obviously, he's in the black suit, which is reminiscent of Batman, but he is doing this for revenge. And like you almost never see that with Spider-Man.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So this sounds interesting, and like you said, Batman vibes. I'm a fan of Batman. I'm a fan of Spider-Man, but I like them both for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that this this version of Peter, does it still feel like it's Peter Parker?
Yeah. So I feel like people might have an issue with that because it is seemingly not Spider-Man-esque.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, Peter had revealed himself. He thought he was doing the right thing and ended up realizing he made a huge mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And if that isn't the most Peter Parker thing I've heard of, I don't know what is. We saw this with Far From Home,
Mm-hmm.
where he made a decision and it became a huge mistake.
Yes.
And he does this constantly throughout. I'm not the biggest Spider-Man fan, but throughout any Spider-Man story I've ever read or watched, he's constantly making issues and second-guessing himself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is totally present in Back in Black. And at this point, it's the culmination of the mistakes he's made in the past finally affecting the thing he wanted to not affect, most of all, his family.
Mm-hmm.
And he's blaming himself, and it's such a tragic story, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets to the point where it is so brutal, where he eventually, I won't spoil it, but he like threatens to shoot webs down someone's throat. And it's like, whoa, that is like the most dark thing I've ever read in a comic, and it's in a Spider-Man comic.
Yeah. Never even thought of that as like a attack you could do.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrifying.
Spider-Man PS4 too.
Yeah.
Finishing move.
I will say, this continues on into One More Day, which is basically the continuation of this, and it focuses more on how Peter's trying to like help Aunt May and like get her back into stable condition, and he's running out of money, and I think it's more so a Peter Parker story, One More Day, there's a part where he goes to Iron Man and he's like, "Hey, you need to help me out here. This is kind of your fault." And it's kind of fascinating. It's like, I love Civil War, so it kind of deals with the ramifications of that story.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, One More Day ends so terribly. I can't fully recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of the worst endings of a story I've ever heard in my entire life.
Interesting.
Just really terrible. Like, Deus Ex Machina meets issues not being resolved, issues being ignored. Just terrible. It's really disappointing because, like, up until that point in One More Day, I really liked it, but once it got to the ending, really terrible. And it's lauded as, like, one of the worst stories ever told for Spider-Man. I'm like, yeesh. I didn't know that going into it, so I was like, I like this so far.
Mm-hmm.
Then finally it ended. But Back in Black, I would absolutely recommend, because it's very different from what I've read for Spider-Man.
Yeah, and it sounds very interesting, because I'd love to see, like, if you said, like, how it still feels like Peter, I'd love to see Peter dealing with that in the, like, Peter approach of, like, how his character would react to seeing May get shot and just seeing him spiral, I guess, but it still feels like Peter. That sounds like an interesting thing that I probably want to check out. Do you know how many issues it is?
It's 5.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 5, and they're around 20 pages each, so
Yeah, I think
pretty quick.
Usually, an issue of a comic ranges from like 20 to 30 for the most part.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, at least. But yeah, Back in Black sounds cool.
Yeah. And I really, for me, diving into Spider-Man is hard because there aren't as many, and we've talked about this in the past, there aren't as many paperback combined stories for Spider-Man compared to, like, Batman, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you want to read Nightfall, or if you want to read The Long Halloween or something, you can go find those, and they're pretty easy to find. But if you want to find a run of Spider-Man, at least in my experience, I feel like it's a little harder. And a lot of the stories that you want to read are more focused on singular issues.
Yeah, I
but
think
this is a good, like, contained, like, graphic novel.
Yeah.
In other terms.
I do think I'm probably going to check that out, because like you said, we've had conversations before about Spider-Man not having good jumping on points for singular stories. That's why I like Spider-Man Blue a lot.
Yeah, Spider-Man Blue is a good example.
And I think a lot of that, you brought it up with Batman, it comes down to the way that Marvel and DC comics both present their universes.
Mm-hmm.
Because DC, like, both of them do have a multiverse, but with DC, it's so, like, they're so open to trying things and having writers and artists come in, experiment, tell their own singular story with these characters. Where Marvel, again, from my knowledge, almost everything is within the same canon outside of, like, the main series of 616 Marvel and then the Ultimate Universe. So maybe the Ultimate Universe has some more of these things that we're wanting out of Marvel characters, like singular stories, less focus on issue to issue, and while some graphic novels are just a combination, like a chunk of issues in a long-standing canon, like Back in Black is part of Amazing Spider-Man.
Yep.
Yeah, I think maybe Ultimate might have some stuff that we could probably look into. So, but yeah, that's cool. I'm glad that, I guess it turned out to be a good one.
Yeah. So. I was just looking up stuff to read for Spider-Man, and that came up. It's Amazing Spider-Man number 539.
Cool.
That's where
Very
it starts.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. And you still read with Marvel Unlimited, right?
I do.
So was it collected also?
It wasn't. Yes.
Or did you have to get the individual issues?
It was collected, at least some of it.
Okay.
I know One More Day was in, like, Spectacular Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. There was a lot of different, like, issues that it was in, and I had to jump around to find them. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure Back in Black was just Amazing Spider-Man. I could be wrong.
All right, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll check that out.
Yeah. What do you got for me, Christian?
So, it is an ongoing series. It started this year. I've only read the first 3 issues. I think there are about six to 8 right now. Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy by Donny Cates is something that I really like. I think Donny Cates is a good writer, and it's insane how many... I follow him on Twitter. It's insane how many books he's tied to right now.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing Guardians of the Galaxy, Venom, which has been going since Fresh Start started, Silver Surfer Black. I think he's working in tandem with the writer who's writing Absolute Carnage, which is an event that starts in August. And that's just within Marvel. Like, I think he has his own independent series with, like, indie comic companies.
Yeah.
But he is a busy man, and Guardians of the Galaxy is cool. Like, it's strange going from the MCU Guardians to comic Guardians, because I love the Guardians so much, and it's not weird, but, like, it's very clearly 2 different... Like, I might even be projecting it to be very clearly 2 different adaptations of these characters, because when the comic starts, it doesn't even start with the Guardians, issue 1. It starts with a bunch of cosmic Marvel characters on a space station where Thanos' brother is speaking to them all. And he's just saying, like, yeah, a lot of you have done incredible things. You've stopped the destruction of universes, of existences, and Thanos is dead. So it's basically the funeral of Thanos, and then there's just a bunch of cosmic Marvel people there in attendance. Notably absent is the Guardians of the Galaxy. And, like, earthly heroes, it's, again, a lot of space people. So Thanos' brother, I'm forgetting his name right now, is basically talking to them all about the death of Thanos, and his lifeless body, sans head, is laying on a table next to him. And he says, they present the last will and testament of Thanos, and it's a hologram of Thanos. And he comes up, and he's, like, cocky as ever. He's going off about, like, I'm a mastermind. I had this planned all from the start. That kind of speech. And he's basically saying that he took his consciousness out of his body, and it's like a sleeper agent in somebody in the Marvel Universe. We don't know who it is. And then he's like, good luck. And then he just, like, dips out, and they all start freaking out. It's like, hey, is Thanos in this room? Are you Thanos? Are you Thanos? And his brother's like, hey, so I gathered you here because we got to, like, sort out what we're going to do about this. Thanos is my brother. There's that tie there, but I don't want him coming back. So, and it's funny because Thanos' brother just looks like a normal human, because I guess Thanos is, like, a mutant or something on his planet.
Is he a good guy, or is his brother?
He seems all right so far.
Yeah.
And he's just like, hey, yeah, he's dead. I know what he did. I don't want him back. Like, sucks that my brother died, but no.
Yeah.
So they start going through, like, likely accomplices, or who could have been passed down. It's like, hey, could it be Gamora? Because, like, it's his daughter. And I guess she had the gauntlet recently. And because it was another Infinity storyline in the past couple years at Marvel. And I guess she did something with them. Not super familiar, but people were, like, not friendly towards her because of something that happened. And they're like, oh, why aren't the Guardians here? And then it cuts to a ship, and the Guardians, as it stands now, is just like a drunk Peter Quill and Groot with a mohawk.
Whoa.
And they're just chilling in space, and they're like, I don't know if they're, like, just depressed or what, because, like, the Guardians are broken up. Rocket is missing, or, like, he left. They broke up there. Gamora had her weird Thanos Infinity Gauntlet thing. I think Drax is dead. So,
damn. The
Guardians, as we know them again, like, Peter and Groot are the only people I have association to, and they're already written distinctly from, like, Chris Pratt. But even Groot is, like, has a different attitude to him. So I think it's an interesting take to set up this run, And at the end of issue 1, the Black Order shows up, steals Thanos' body, hauls him off somewhere else, and a lot of the cosmic people that were there are either like dead, missing, sucked through a black hole. But Beta Ray Bill, who, if you're not familiar, is like Thor but a horse. Him, Moondragon. I'm blanking on another woman. Cosmic Ghost Rider, which is just Frank Castle from like the future that got brought back to be Ghost Rider.
Interesting.
And had to take care of baby Thanos.
Okay.
And I think that was like the main group. They get spit out in front of Peter's ship, brings him on board. Nova shows up. They're like, hey, we have questions for these people because there was like a meeting that was going on. And he's like, hey, you can't do this because they're part of my crew. We're the new Guardians of the Galaxy. And then the story from there is like cool because it's this mystery of who's Thanos now. What's the deal with the like slapdash Guardians? Because Frank Castle didn't even want to be on the team.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that conflict, and he's like, hey, no, don't drag me into this. No. It's characters that I'm not super familiar with, like Moondragon. And I keep forgetting the other girl's name. But like Beta Ray Bill I'm familiar with just because of the ridiculousness of that character.
Yeah.
But seeing them play together in a way that makes up Guardian vibes, I'm really enjoying. There's a mystery, like I said. Hela is involved. She's kind of commanding the Black Order right now. They're the ones that got Thanos' body for her. And then there's the conflict of the Goddess of Death wanting to bring Thanos back to life. And there's a conflict between her and Lady Death. So there's some cool stuff going on. I think it's a nice hopping on point, again, because it started so recently. It's still under 10 issues. But it's a cool take on characters that I have a fondness for that is giving me a reason to care about them outside of the movies.
That sounds really interesting. So how would you compare Guardians in the comics, at least here, especially Peter Quill, with the MCU Guardians?
So the way I'm reading Peter Quill is like, you know how like Chris Pratt Quill has like a snarkiness to him and like a confidence? This Peter Quill has like is tired and kind of like sarcastic but like careless sarcasm. And he's just like, oh yeah, whatever. Like he's very laid back, which is interesting for Peter, but I still like it. It still feels like what I would think Peter Quill would be. And I'm reading him in, I'm forgetting the actor's name, but do you remember the guy from Lost with the chin?
Lost with the chin.
The guy with like the chiseled face and the chin.
Oh, Sawyer.
Sure.
Yeah. That's Josh Holloway.
I forgot his name, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm reading him like him.
Okay.
Because I'm familiar with him because, speaking of Community, he guested on like a Western-themed paintball episode, so he was already playing an outlaw, kind of.
That's funny.
So
I just rewatched Lost again, so
I remembered. That's why I knew I could like ask you for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm reading him as like a tired outlaw that's just like trying to get by, but he's not like Old Man Logan. He's not like a weary Batman or anything. He's like, he still feels like Peter Quill. He's just like kind of like, whatever, man. I'm just trying to live in space right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Groot has like an attitude to him, but not in the way that like teen Groot has. He has a mohawk, and he's like constantly seen just like shaving wood off of himself. And he's Groot. I don't know how to describe it. He has like a timidness, but like a emo timidness to him, and it's just a weird way to present these characters that is weird enough and unique enough that I still like it, and it still feels like them because of what they're showing me. But I'm not comparing too much, and I'm not being like, I like this better about the MCU Guardians. Haven't gotten to Gamora yet, haven't gotten to Rocket yet, so TBD. But I think it's a cool gateway to Cosmic Marvel because of the tie-in with those characters that I'm not familiar with, like Moondragon and Cosmic Ghost Rider.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's cool, and it's worth checking out at least the first issue.
where does this fall into Marvel Comics right now, like in the run of things, in the canon?
So, I think the past few Guardians runs still happened. Whatever involvement the Guardians have had in the greater MCU, like Civil War 2 and stuff, happened. Because like Peter was tied in with Civil War 2. I think it's still the same Peter. They haven't made any like definitive stance about it being a different universe. Like they mentioned the Avengers. They're like, hey, yeah, Avengers have a history with Thanos, but they're off doing their own thing. They're humans. They have like human problems. This is like we need the Silver Surfer. We need Cosmic Ghost Rider, Nova Corps, people of that level. So yeah, I think it's canon. I'm pretty sure it's in line with the history of the Guardians in Marvel Comics. So it does have a history that's been presented. Like I know there was a recent run where Kitty Pryde from the X-Men had like a relationship with Peter Quill.
Mm-hmm.
But and she's brought up, like he video calls her in issue 2, I think, and he's being flirty, but she's married to Colossus now, and he's like, hey, I don't know what to do. So like there is a world that exists and a history that exists with these characters, but I think it's presented in a way that is easy to latch onto and easy to care about.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this started this year, right? It's
yes.
like brand new.
I think in
Okay.
March or April, maybe?
I remember you talking about this earlier on when we were doing early Excelsiors back in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I've always been interested in the Guardians after the movie came out.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, like, unless you were a hardcore comics fan, I feel like no one really knew who the Guardians were.
Yeah, I wasn't
But now
familiar.
everyone knows who they are. Because I think, personally, they're the funniest. They have the funniest movies in the MCU.
Yeah, they're really, really good.
So.
And, yeah, I think it's a nice gateway to Cosmic Marvel. Like, they have some weird things they throw out there about, like, races or language or currency that is, like, don't know what that is. Sure, it's important, but not important enough for me to not get enjoyment out of what I'm reading or know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, I do think it's a cool jumping on point. And, like, another distinction between this and the movies is the movies have the soundtracks. So this has to present style in ways outside of audio. And I think the art is really good, and the overall attitude of it gets it to have its own unique feel for those characters. So
that is interesting because you're right. I feel like for most of the Guardians, the feel of that movie is the soundtrack.
yeah.
So that's interesting that they have to like find another way to like get the feel of the Guardians for this universe.
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
I like it a lot. I think the first arc is done now. I'm not finished with it, but the first arc of this whole story, this whole run, is complete. You can buy Volume 1, I think, now. The next arc involves Rocket, I know, from like reading the brief Comixology blurb about future issues. So I'm excited to see where they take it because it's written very well. So
Nice. Yeah, I'll definitely have to give that a read.
yeah. Are there anything else? Are there any other comics that you're curious about? Any that you're like looking to read? Doesn't have to be tied down to Marvel anymore.
I was reading. I didn't fully finish it, and I'm gonna pull it up here on my Unlimited account. I'm trying to. Oh, it was Spider-Man No More.
Oh right.
This was like back in the '60s, and I'm probably like halfway through it. It's like kind of a bigger issue. Not in like length-wise, like page number, but like the amount of words on page back then was significantly more, I found, than it is nowadays.
That's
not
interesting.
not that it's like hard to read or like long to read, but it's just a little bit longer than nowadays, I feel. And I only made it halfway through. I was reading it at work, and then I had to go do something. But it's interesting because reading 60s Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and like that's like the original Spider-Man writers, is fascinating because I don't associate that style of writing with Spider-Man, even though that's how it started out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird going back to like how it originally was, because I'm much more used to like Sam Raimi, now with like John Watts Spider-Man and these kind of in Spider-Man PS4. So it's cool to see the original intention of Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I definitely want to get back to and finish that.
Yeah, that's the Spider-Man mask in the trash can cover, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
which was a scene used in Spider-Man 2.
Hell yeah, it was.
Even the line, "I'm Spider-Man no more."
Yeah,
He's talking
yeah.
to Uncle Ben. Yeah, that's cool. I want to check out some earlier Marvel stuff, like I said several times on this here program. I want to read the Jack Kirby Eternals run. It's not long. I just haven't had, I guess, the right timing for it, because it's always been on sale when I'm like, I'm not feeling a comic right now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely want to check that out. I'm gonna catch up on the current Amazing Spider-Man run. I kind of want to check out Venom just because I really like how Donny Cates is writing Guardians, and I hear good things about Venom. And then there's that Carnage event happening, which I'm sure is going to have some tie to Venom because of the symbiote. But yeah, for Marvel, I think that's my focus right now. I started the first few issues of the current Daredevil run. It was cool. It was slow, but like, haven't had the pull to go back and check out more yet. But I'm curious still. So we'll see what happens there. But
That's interesting you bring up Daredevil, because but recently I've wanted to read Man with No Fear.
yeah.
And you recommended Daredevil Yellow.
Yes, because that was also the writers and artists of Spider-Man Blue.
In Captain America White, right? Is that true?
I think it's Captain America White, Hulk Gray, Spider-Man Blue, and Daredevil Yellow.
Okay.
I think
I've
there are all
read
4 of those.
Captain America White is fantastic.
Really?
I've read that. Yeah, it is Captain America thinking about his past with Bucky in like the 40s, but he's alive nowadays.
That's cool. Yeah.
I don't know if it's present time, but it's like a significant time jump,
Yeah.
like how the MCU dealt with it.
Mhm.
And it's all like recollections of Captain America. It's fascinating. I love it.
Nice. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out too, because I love Spider-Man Blue.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, they both did a great job with that character. So if you think that they did as good a job with Captain America, I'm definitely want to check that out.
Mm-hmm.
Because like we said with Spider-Man, there's not many good jumping on points for individual stories for characters, and Captain America is someone that, at least from my readings so far, haven't been a huge fan of.
Yeah.
Like Civil War Captain America didn't love. Oh, that reminds me too, I want to check out the current Avengers run, because I hear that's really good too. I think they had like a war with vampires, and then Blade was in there for a little bit. Like, so it sounds cool. I want to check it out. But as we wind down here, what has been your favorite comic you've read? If you want to get it distinct, either give your one that we've read as a book club thing first, and then one that you read individually. If you have one that is just the clear crowning jewel of them all, go for that. But what do you think?
So honorable mention to Vision, because it was so surprising to me.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought I would care for Vision ever. So I thought took me by surprise, and I really liked that one. The one that we read as a book club that's my favorite, is probably Old Man Logan. Because I've never read anything with Wolverine in it for a comic, and the way they dealt with him was so true to his character, at least the ones that I've seen in the movies, especially with Logan. So I loved reading that. I thought that was fascinating, and by my own, I really liked Back in Black. I think that is one you should definitely check out.
Yeah, you're basically in the same boat as me, because I was struggling for this question to either give it to Vision or Old Man Logan, because with Vision, I still remember some of the panels from Vision of just how dark it got, and how surprising a lot of that book was, and just how like tied in I was for every single page. But Old Man Logan, like you said, and has been a theme of this episode, not a lot of side stories, but that one was so good and so unique and dealt with superheroes in a genre that I've really only seen explored in film and games, I guess, but had like its own unique twist on it. I thought that was really good too. So definitely both of those are the top two for me.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as independent reading goes, probably Spider-Man, just because it's like very feel good. I really like the Guardians run, like I mentioned, but having a continuous source of Spider-Man media that's ongoing to just be consuming between movies and games and stuff is, now that I'm invested in it, going to be very good and something I keep up with for the years to come.
I think nowadays is the best time for Spider-Man content.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but around the time the Arkham games came out, I was just enveloped with Batman material. Mm-hmm. Anything I could get my hands on. I read a ton of comics. I've seen every Batman movie even before that.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I'm just consuming so much Spider-Man content.
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, I just replayed Spider-Man PS4 for the DLC, and I got 100% on the trophies. Been reading a bunch of Spider-Man stuff, Back in Black, Spider-Man Blue, all that kind of stuff. Far From Home just came out. And we're getting good Spider-Man content, too. It's not bad. I think Tom Holland is the best on-screen Spider-Man I've seen, personally. So yeah, I think now is a great time for Spider-Man content.
Yeah.
And I would recommend your recommendation of jumping on that Spider-Man train.
Yeah, I agree, and I know it's like a basic answer, but I feel like growing up, Spider-Man and Batman were my two, and then...
Me too.
When Batman was the hotness in the late 2000s, it was like, oh yeah, Batman's my favorite superhero, easy. But like around I guess when The Amazing Spider-Man came out, ever since then, I started paying more attention to more Spider-Man things outside of the movies. And yeah, I think like it's weird because I have more of a nostalgia for Spider-Man, even though so much of my like teen years was Batman oriented. But yeah, Spider-Man is like in a renaissance right now. It's awesome. I'm very happy to be a Spider-Man fan today with, like you said, every single source we have for Spider-Man content, because I haven't been disappointed with any of it. So
yeah, me either.
Well, I am disappointed that the show is over.
Oh yeah.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this journey. This has been an incredible podcast. I think this is I think this is only the second podcast I've done. I did it like a few more since the start of the show, but this was one of the most fun podcasts I've done. Absolutely. Yeah. Just to sit around every week and talk about Marvel, especially the MCU, was absolutely a joy.
Yeah, I had a blast. I'm gonna see if Pat can do a short talk with me at some point before we all go off for the rest of the summer and you enter the working world.
Mm-hmm.
But
hopefully.
Yeah. So thank you for joining me on this. Thanks for agreeing to do this with me. I've had a blast. It's one of my favorite projects I've ever worked on. And a lot of it does come down to you and Pat being awesome co-hosts and support for the show. So thank you. I'm going to say thanks to Pat again later. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it for this one. But, yeah, I've had a blast. So if
I will say, sorry to cut you off. I will say you have absolutely been the mastermind of the show. For those listening, Christian set up like the most insane set in our college, some spare room in our college that no one uses. And just made it into this really awesome set. So you have really done all the legwork for the show. So I will say I commend you for that.
Thank you for that. But yeah, thank you. And we are going to be returning in some other form, we being me and Pat, later in the year for another review series. I can just say it now. We're gonna do a Star Wars podcast in the vein of Excelsior. Starting October 10th, we're going to be reviewing one movie a week, including the side story movies, not including Clone Wars. Didn't fill in any time for that.
Oh, but yeah. You don't need to watch that one anyways.
Oh, the movie, yeah.
The movie's not good. Series is awesome. Movie's not good.
Still meaning to check out the series, but Yeah, so we're going to be reviewing one Star Wars movie a week starting October 10th, leading up to The Rise of Skywalker in December. So, Jack, if you're ever in town, feel free to hop on for one of those episodes too.
Yeah.
But if there's anything you'd like to plug before I give the whole outro and rigmarole of podcast services, where can people find you? And yeah, any shout-outs?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at FascinatedJack.
Very nice. So if you enjoyed the show, you can find it in its entirety on podcast services, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, any other podcast service that should be up there. Excelsior, like I said, this run of Excelsior is over. Potentially, you could be seeing reworkings of the Excelsior brand on youtube.com/joyclicks in the coming months, or whenever there's a Marvel movie that's coming out. Maybe we'll bring it back for an episode or two. So, if you enjoyed the show, you can follow us on Twitter at joyclicks, and on Instagram, at joyclicksofficial. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter at Chris N. Buckley. But one more time, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me, Jack. Shout out to Pat Maroney. And as always, Excelsior.
Excelsior.
Excelsior!